Resident Evil started development in 1993 and went on for 3 years to be released on March 22nd of 1996. Resident Evil, despite all of its graphical improvements and innovations at the time that it came out, also had some wonderful looking box art and of different variations. In this video here, we are going to look at, identify, analyze all of the wonderful aspects of the box art, images, and artistic marketing of Resident Evil, also otherwise known as Biohazard. This is the initial Longbox version, which is for the release, which is also very difficult to come by. The Longbox version of PlayStation games housed a nice little spine that actually made it look like an actual book, with a nice front glossy cover with the name in red of Resident Evil, with a white outline and drop shadow. The person you're actually seeing in the front has been debated by a few folks, but later on to somewhat confirmed that the person you're looking at is Richard Akin. Many folks in the beginning of Resident Evil when they were playing, including myself, just assumed that this was Chris Redfield as the main person. If you look super close to the face, though, you can see that the extreme and the psychological effect of the game. In the background, it also shows a silhouette of the actual room itself in a corner with two distinct spiders that are actually shown in the artwork. Spiders, of course, you run into in the game, which are actually one of the harder enemies to kill, as well as can inflict poison on the actual character. If you look closer also into the walls in the back, you can also see remnants of eyeballs and even teeth, with some silhouettes of canal orifices of noses to signify and show the zombies, but in a nice silhouette, subliminal messaging sort of feel, but not to full out confirm, at least in this particular case, that zombies is the main focus of this game. Resident Evil had a very interesting way when you purchased the game and seeing this person and seeing some of these silhouettes, which I myself, as a 12-year-old kid, never did distinctly get to look at close enough to know that when I was purchasing this game, that you would be encountering these individuals. I mean, of course, the exaggerated face, psychological horror that this person is exhibiting, with the focus of aggression, sadness, depression, and some form of adrenaline, definitely showed that this game was going to be impactful for whoever experienced it. Of course, the ESRB of the mature rating of ages 17 plus. What was nice is on the actual spine of it is showing the Resident Evil and Capcom logos, of course, with the PlayStation and Resident Evil logo on top. And the same can be seen on the other side of the spine. In the back, the words of "You're dead scare, face your fear," which is an understatement, at least at the time of release, is highlighted at the top with 4 to 5 screenshots on the right, carouseling down to the bottom. Looking closely past the text itself, you can see the first zombie that you encounter, which is shown in the back with the illustration of its face. Under the "You're Dead Scare and Face Your Fear" title at the top, it does further explain how the Bravo team that was being sent to investigate a bunch of grisly murders, communication was completely cut off, as you're now part of the Alpha team. It also indicates and talks about how you are in an isolated mansion on the run, and that you should arm yourself with anything you can find, which they do highlight: knives, pistols, shotguns, and flamethrowers. It even indicates how you search for hidden rounds to stay alive, which is kind of the highlight of Resident Evil in itself, mainly because of the fact that not only were you there to survive and destroy the others, but doing it in such a way where survival was imperative based on resource management and even facing your fears. At the same time, it also highlights that there are puzzles that need to be solved, traps to disarm, and mysteries to uncover And while you're avoiding the bloodbath with the freaks of nature that populate the mansion, which in this case would be zombies. Each lurking horror you survive will bring you closer to the source of the Resident Evil, which it highlights the unprecedented detail, intense texture map, shadows, and lighting effects based on the flat planes with a 3D outline and 3D polys of the character, as well as the weapons and special effects. The unique camera angles, action perspectives, and realistic polygon character graphics at the time were revolutionary, and even though nowadays that would indicate that the fixed camera angles is a detriment, at the time it was a wonderful feature and experiencing the horror of the mansion itself. The mansion would be a lot smaller, a lot easier to handle if it didn't have those different and chaotic looking camera angles. It even highlights facing unstoppable zombies, monstrous spiders, mutilated snakes, and other unknown horrors, which is indicating the hunters that get revealed later, as well as the tyrants that are never even indicated. Explore hundreds of rooms, which I'm sure is a slight exaggeration, even though there probably is closer to 100. If you combine the two with the honest digital soundtrack as the Resident Evil 3D environment. And on the last line itself, it actually indicates choosing which soldier to play, each creates their own graphic storyline, which in this case is only one of two, which would be Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. So as you look here, it also has the small details in legal print, the zip, the actual barcode, and the mature blood and gore and animated violence warning that's on the right, with the one player and memory card one block. Opening up the actual long box itself will reveal the manual. But before we even get to the manual, look at the inside of it. If you were to look closely and not even know much about the game, and showing the laboratory that's highlighted here and the backdrop itself, it might give you a clue as to maybe what are the things that you're going to experience before even getting into the game. Also, the other thing to highlight, which is the actual disc itself. When you look closer at the disc, of course, it has Resident Evil with the eye, the iconic eye itself that is actually dripping with blood. This in itself is more towards the Japanese Biohazard release of the box art of the Japanese and Asian releases, as it has that iconic eye with the dripping of blood. But instead of Resident Evil, of course, it says Biohazard. If you look even further, after looking at the insert and opening up and lifting the disc, you see a remnant of a room with what looks like destruction from the window, actual blobs of blood, and also other terrible, awful things in this particular room. It's not insinuating that it's been ransacked by any means, but taken over by a animalistic type of force, with even claws at the top right to indicate the hunter that would later make an appearance. Looking at the instruction manual itself, shows the iconic art on the front with the dossier contents of the STARS Raccoon Police Department Special Tactics and Rescue Squad insignia. It even has a special message that I'm sure not many has read that says, "Thank you for selecting Resident Evil, a frightening journey into the deepest corners of the macabre and the mysterious." Resident Evil represents a new dawn in video gaming and takes a major step bridging the gap between games, motion pictures, and reality. We at Capcom are proud to bring you this thrilling new addition to your video game library. The rest of the portions is the warning of reading before using your PlayStation console, warning to owners of projection televisions, handling your PlayStation disc, and Capcom Online and accessing information. More mission setup, which basically talks about your PlayStation console and diagram, as well as the mission controls on what's being used. Note that there is a number of buttons here that aren't even used that are actually highlighted in the mission controls. Another thing to note is that even this portion here that many people tend to forget is the D-pad direction of going forward, pushing an item, turning left, turning right, and go backwards. I don't think anybody would have taken a moment to notice these tank control kind of method that many people would eventually note later on. There's also special controls to check items by using the action button, which is very common use. Holding the run button, use weapon, push item. And even resetting the game by pushing start to open the status screen. You can also hold the select and start buttons simultaneously for 2 seconds in order to restart, which a lot of games tend to use for the PlayStation. However, not many folks are aware of this. And then on the right, it talks about top secret mission Raccoon Forest, which it's never been indicated that the mission was called Raccoon Forest other than the location. It highlights the force's stars with the unit of the Alpha Team with the location of Raccoon Forest. It also highlights the Alpha Team just in text, of course no images. Barry Burton, Weapon Specialist, Joseph Frost, Vehicle Specialist, Chris Redfield, which is just indicated as a marksman, Jill Valentine, which is interesting because she's indicated as a machine expert, but no one really mentions that. Brad Vickers, of course, Chicken Heart Vickers, is also known as the pilot, and Albert Wesker, who is the mission leader. Of course, Albert Wesker is known to have his sunglasses even during the dark times. The Bravo team, which is seen in somewhat different ways, some not, is Richard Aiken, the communications, which is also the person on the front. At least that's what the debate has been indicated as. Rebecca Chambers, medical. Edward Dewey is the pilot, which I'm pretty sure is indicated in the beginning of when they do find the copter and the remains of them. Enrico Marini, which is the mission leader. Forest Bayer, vehicle specialist, both of those are eventually found later on in the game. And of course, Kenneth J. Sullivan, which is one of the major critical casualties of Resident Evil in the mansion. Interesting enough, the top secret is on the left, indicating of what the actual mission is before even opening up the game. Special Tactics and Rescue Squad, top secret. New members of Alpha Team arrive in Raccoon City late in day. Earlier strange reports comes in from locals about missing people, unusual sightings of dog-like monsters. The mangled remains of a woman hiker are fished out of a river. The police report notes that something powerful had gotten a hold of her, judging by the depth of the teeth marks. Most likely, grizzly or a wolf attack. Public demands police action. Police actions is also indicated twice. Entrance to the mountain road barricaded. Stars contacted. Stars informed that hiker was part of tourist group that had gone into the mountains a few days earlier. Stars Bravo team joins mountainside search for more hikers. Bravo team helicopter discovers a mansion. Engine fails. Helicopter goes down. Contact lost with Bravo team over mountains. Alpha team mission objectives: investigate Raccoon Forest area, locate Bravo team helicopter, locate and rescue Bravo team members, and bring the situation under control. What's interesting about this is that it also informs a little bit more information that when Stars was contacted, and I assume probably from the police squad, which is going to be the Raccoon City Police Department, when they contacted Stars, even though Stars is part of it, unless they're indicating that the police that contacted them initially might have been Mounties or maybe another division that was never indicated. But it was also never really highlighted that tourist groups, even hikers, remains were fished out of the actual river. And also, we never really see a river in the actual game itself, other than, of course, towards the end with the dam. I wonder if it means that is the same thing. This highlights more about actually starting a mission and how to bypass the actual initial screen opening sequence, new game, load game, and saving, which is highlighting about the ink ribbons and the actual typewriters in the game. This also highlights kind of the good and the bad when it comes to saving and loading, as there is a number of extreme things that you can do of saving and loading experiences, where if you have too many files, which I assume Capcom was expecting folks to save a lot of entries, that you can only save so many, and if too many files appear, you're going to be unable to save more data on top of that memory card, which at this time memory cards were very easy to override and very easy to fill up. It also indicates loading and how to do not load if you so choose to change your mind later. Next, it actually shows the star's status screen when you press the start button during the gameplay. This highlights and shows all the different items, how to use and equip, checking, and even combining, which it does indicate that if you want to actually combine clip to the gun, you can actually do that on this particular screen. It even highlights the status screen on the next page of the EK or ECG, which is the electrocardiograph. This indicates a reading when you're fine all the way into danger, which indicates your life and your life status while you're playing the game. Map, file, and even radio when that becomes an option. This also highlights the different things that you can do with those items and on this particular screen, even showing maps, files, and even the radio when the option becomes available. The radio itself does beep at different times, and that's actually when you can go to the screen and select it in order to indicate or cause a cutscene to actually create. This also highlights the item box, and it indicates that Chris can only carry 6 items while Jill can only carry 8. That these item boxes are strategically placed and you must use them wisely because they are limited in space, which most of us can indicate that the item box I don't think has ever really been full before. However, you can actually fill up your item box to full if there's no slots available. This also indicates and talks about the different item box option modes. In other words, how you're actually able to pull items out of the box. The option mode itself can actually be used to actually change the way that you play the game with your controller. The next section highlights a lot of the standard equipment for weapons, even though as Chris you're not going to get a standard handgun. But it does talk about combat knife being good for a close fight, but not nearly as powerful or protective as firearms. Which then talks about a 9mm handgun, also was known as the Samurai Edge, even though it doesn't really talk about it a whole lot in this particular setup. And then of course, the other portion of this is going to be the shotgun that is also used pretty heavily. And then it actually goes into show each individual person star's bios, which again, I'm sure many folks have not seen this, even though it is part of the actual manual itself. It talks about Barry Burton. So let's go through all of these together. Barry Burton, of course, who's 38 at the time. And they like to talk about the height, weight, and blood type, which indicates that Barry and Chris are old friends and partner and former SWAT team members. Barry maintains all the supplies for all STARS members, and he has over 16 years of experience and has led many projects to success. Barry is also indicated as a trusted ally, but has had some trouble with his wife and 2 daughters. He may look or sound depressed at times. Joseph Frost, who don't really get to see much, as the vehicle specialist for the Alpha team. He's age 27, 5 feet 10 inches 59 pounds, and blood type is B. Joseph is young, enthusiastic, and very curious. Chris Redfield, who's 25, 5 feet 11 inches, 177 pounds, and blood type is O. After being kicked out of the Air Force, he's been a drifter until he met Barry, who recruited him for the newly formed Stars. Chris has been reassigned to a smaller unit at Raccoon City headquarters to prove himself quickly. Chris is a tough guy who possesses both a strong mentality and great vitality. Jill Valentine, who's even younger at 23, 5 feet 5 inches, 111 pounds, blood type of B. And she's a very intelligent soldier that has saved many Stars members from danger in the past. Jill's been reassigned to the Raccoon City, just like Chris. She is excellent with special devices such as lockpicks. Jill has strong moral convictions and fights for what she believes in. While she has a great capacity for holding items, her small vitality puts her at a disadvantage, indicating that Jill will take more hurt and pain and danger when actually injured versus Chris, but for the sake of having less space for items. And this goes on further to explain the rest of the Stars bios of all of the other team members that you'll run into. Brad Vickers, who's 35, 134 pounds, 5 feet 9 inches. Apparently, Brad is a computers expert and excels in information gathering, but his fear of dying draws much heat from his fellow soldiers. His lack of enthusiasm for rushing into danger has earned him the nickname Chicken Heart. While Chris is a qualified pilot, Brad has become the helicopter pilot for the Alpha team. Albert Wesker, who's actually older than most, but is the same age as Barry Burton, who's 6 feet, 186 pounds. He's risen quickly inside the Stars organization, currently leads the Alpha team. Viewed by many as a cool guy from his snappy haircut to his perpetual shades, Wesker was recruited by a hunter for his sharp insight that eventually founded the Stars unit in Raccoon City. Richard Aiken, who's 23, 5 feet 8 inches, 138 pounds, blood type is AB. Very important member of Stars, serving as Bravo's communications expert. The only link back to headquarters for teams out in the field, Richard actually has to pull a double duty as radio man for both units, which is very interesting that they never really highlighted that before. Alpha Team really has no trained operator except for Jill, who has a knack for technology. A very positive person, Richard greets new members warmly. Of course, Rebecca Chambers, who is 18, 5 feet 3 inches, 93 pounds, blood type AB. She's the youngest member of the group. Rebecca has been recruited for her knowledge of field medicine and first aid. She is nervous around other members, both because of her age and due to her lack of experience. Rebecca is eager to please and will take any task assigned to her without hesitation. And then, of course, the rest of this highlights Enrico Marini, the Forest Spayer, and Kenneth J. Sullivan. And then you can also get your own strategy guide by ordering your own copy now, as it indicates you'll be stranded without it, basically to Capcom's official strategy guide itself. And then even highlights some of the top tips of survival. The supply of ink ribbons is very limited, which notice the changes that was done for the North American version and even the European version is that there is less ink ribbons that was provided, where instead of 3, you only get 2. Some of the enemies can be bypassed if you're quick, so try escaping from these whenever you can. Pick your battles carefully in order to save ammo for more powerful enemies. Yes, and that outlines the actual strategy of using either health or ammo in different situations, or just bypassing them altogether. Weapon effectiveness also varies with range and target. The bazooka and the shotgun, and also indicating on firearms and standard equipment. Listen for your enemies, sometimes you can hear them. And then in addition to this is also the warranty information that you can actually send in with a registration card, which I'm sure has been capitalized very much so. And then on the back of this actually highlights more of the strategy guide that you can actually get, which you can order on page 19. So this is the North American version of Resident Evil when in the Longbox version. As of right now, is also very difficult to actually find in a good pristine shape and way that it's used. I had to order 3 of these and I piece them together for it to actually be made into the most pristine that I can make it as of now. And even in this case, it's not super perfect either. Other versions of Resident Evil was made later on in smaller versions, as you see here, which looks like it actually shows the same material and same information, just in a smaller avenue. As you can see, it's got the same type of table of contents, but in a smaller set of instructions with more pages, same warranty information, especially for the strategy guide and registration card, and even the tips. The only thing in addition to this is that it does have an actual portion for notes. So the smaller version of this that's indicated here, like I said in the beginning, is going to have the front art, which is going to be just about the same as the long box. One thing I want to highlight too that's also been noticed is that if you look really close to the actual weapon itself, it looks very photoshopped, as it's a combination of 3 weapons. It looks like it has a long barrel of a rifle or possibly a shotgun itself, with the actual pump on the front, with a interesting and weirdly kind of morphed chamber towards the end with a rifle slash shot or machine gun that he's holding on to. But make note, on the smaller version, the only type of actual insert or art that's actually highlighted in this version is the smaller room version of the messed up and destroyed room that was shown here, like it is shown in the second insert of this. Of course, there's no insert on the front that shows the laboratory, which then kind of indicates and gives the impression that you're not going to find out as much information in detail on the smaller one, but not by much. And then, of course, looking at the back, the same, you're dead scared, face your fear. And then the same type of bullet points now kind of pressed in all the different portions with the different screenshots, indicating the synopsis at the top of the introduction in order to get to the source of Resident Evil. PC version of this is actually very similar to that, as you can see here. The only difference there will be is that there's a little bit closer of an artistic format. The disc itself is very much different, as it has a lot more color and the actual silhouette of the zombie that's indicated here. However, the instructions are also very similar, other than the fact that there's more technical setup and installation, because of course this is the PC version of it itself. It's also kind of more kind of pressed in with all the different actual text and links, with less information and showing of the actual characters and what they look like. So this will have a lot more technical information, as well as indicating, I think by this time, an epilepsy warning for a very small percentage of folks that are actually playing the game with the flashing lights in the beginning. And then, if we look on the back itself, it's actually got more of, if you compare the two, it actually has a black background with the same type of highlighted wording of "You're Dead Scared," with a little bit more icons and different ways that was ported over to the PC version. It also indicates, instead of a mature rating, that it's suitable for only persons of 15 years or older. So in itself, it looks like not only did they go a little bit less, but they actually went just a little bit easier on folks that were getting it on the PC version itself. And then last but not least is the PAL version, which is going to be the actual version that's available in Europe, which has a similar type of insert as the rest of them. However, as you can see here, the actual setup, the way that it looks, and the condition of this one is a little bit rougher around the edges. With PlayStation games, at least in PAL, at least that I've seen in Europe, is that it's called and indicated as the Platinum Edition. Which, if you compare with the both, what's really cool is that the spine on it itself actually has PlayStation, which is really cool. They like to put the PlayStation logo and then, of course, the Platinum title at the bottom, with a lot of silver on the spine itself. This, of course, has its own insert with even the PlayStation logo on the top and the bottom. But it has the insert and it also has the instruction booklet at the same time, with a little bit more, I would say, graphics of information, as you can see here. It shows the same type of status screen, the intro, synopsis, and even the bios, as well as strategy notes, which is a little bit interesting, and warranty information. This, of course, comes with its own registration ticket. This looks like it's more for Virgin Interactive than it is for Capcom, which it looks like it's for the console registration card. The discs themselves, though, is kind of the part that's interesting because it's silver with a very simple title at the top, which it does have the Platinum logo, Capcom, Virgin Interactive, and of course the title of it, but on a silver type of disc with no back insert that actually shows the laboratory or the room itself. Of course, if you look at the back, the actual text of it is very similar to the rest of You're Dead Scared and Face Your Fear, with the actual silhouette and kind of opaquency of the zombie in the back, with all the same very similar text. The only difference here is that it's got a lot more Capcom Entertainment Inc. and PlayStation Compact Disc, as well as Virgin Interactive is highlighted with Capcom. So this in itself is interesting because this is showing the three different box art versions and information that is highlighted for Resident Evil the game, which I myself am finding some interesting variations and differences. The Resident Evil box art, more than ever, is wonderful and a great thing to continue to live on and show, but in a digital front, as it seems that more and more discs are disappearing from the use of physical media and into the digital age revolution. But is it a standard now that we should try and keep all of the physical media an ongoing thing, or should we just absorb or go into the new digital frontier where media and box art and artistry may be a little bit less and less significant in the details? But now you have to ask yourself, though, because we went through all this information, did you actually catch all of these things beforehand? Resident Evil has a special place in my heart, and even though it's interesting that we talked about the North American version, just wait until we get into the Japanese version and the other versions of the actual game. This is just the original version. There's a director's cut, there is a DualShock director's cut, and more. So stay tuned for future videos on showing the box art and celebrating the wonderful artistic impression and shown of all of the Resident Evil boxes and different versions. Now, I just wanted to make a note that yes, Capcom created Resident Evil as a game, and I do want to make note that the great and fantastic artwork that's shown here to capitalize this psychological effect and illustration of the game itself was captured by a comic book artist named Bill Stinkwiz. And I'm sorry, Bill, if I'm mispronouncing your last name. But he is well known for a number of Marvel artworks. I believe Moon Knight was one of them, as well as some other artwork itself. So yes, artist Bill Sinkwitz is the one that created and actually made this particular Resident Evil artwork for all the North American and European markets. Thanks again for sticking with me and looking through the box art and going through this journey together of watching Resident Evil before it's even played and in the box art of the games and physical media. Stay tuned for future videos to talk about the next versions, Director's Cut, DualShock version, and even more, even the greatest hits. Speak soon.